Calix Boxing, I'm live. CalixBoxing.com, CalixBoxing2 on Twitter, CalixBoxing 2.0 right here on YouTube. Hit that sub button, hit the like button. If you're catching it in the archive views have been great, man. I appreciate all the support. And please make sure to continue to subscribe, hit the alerts, all that good stuff. If you are watching this in the archive, which about 90% of you will be, and always leave comments below because I read them, get back to them. All that good stuff. And check out the community page for updates on the articles, because daily articles. And I just updated the top 12 pound for pound on CalixBoxing.com. And we have a new participant in the top 12 pound for pound, and his name is Artur Beterbiev. And what a performance he put on against Joe Smith Jr. Woo! Woo! What a performance we had from Artur Beterbiev against Joe Smith Jr. And I apologize if there are going to be some hiccups today because I'm dealing with some horrific allergies. There was a Saharan dust storm that came across the Atlantic and hit the Gulf Coast, and it just left me in shambles this past week. So that's what I'm dealing with. So I'm going to be drinking a lot of water, a lot of itchiness going on from that Saharan dust storm. So that's what I'm dealing with right now. But I had to come on here and talk about Beterbiev. It just left me excited, the performance. And I was expecting a great fight that would turn into a great performance. That's what I was expecting in this fight. And Vegas was as well. When Vegas priced, and I talked about this Thursday when we went over the betting odds. Shout out Johnny Boy in the building. And if you're in the building, comment. Hit the like button. Please hit the like button. If you do anything, hit that like button. And please leave comments as well. But when we talked about the betting odds last Thursday on this channel, Vegas set this up, and you can read into betting odds to see what Vegas is thinking, right? What the handicappers are thinking. And these guys are the best of the best. They're the best of the best. They'll always get some wrong. And they got the result right here, but they got how the result would come and how quick it would come. Shout out Y in the building. How quick it would come. They got that wrong. But they do the best out of everybody. They put their brains together, their boxing brains. They have insider information into both camps. And if you read into their betting lines last week, they expected a fight that would go deep. They expected Joe Smith Jr. to have his moments early. And the reason they expected Joe Smith Jr. to have his moments early is because Beterbiev is a guy who starts slow, 29 point something punches per round the first 2 rounds. That's what he averages. He's a slow starter. He's up there in age. Guys are able to get to him early until he starts to methodically break them down as he speeds up. He throws per round. As the rounds go on, his output goes up. He averages like 63 punches per round, something crazy for a light heavyweight. And that's crazy for a guy who's so heavy-handed. He doesn't just rely on one punch. He methodically breaks you down and opens you up as the fight goes on, right? This is what we talked about as far as the betting odds last Thursday. And Vegas was clearly expecting a fight that was going to go that way. Joe Smith Jr. having moments early, maybe winning some rounds in the process. But as the middle rounds came about, 5, 6, 7, 8, that's when Beterbiev was going to open up Joe Smith Jr. in the process and methodically break him down. There were trends going on for both fighters coming into this fight, right? Beterbiev's last 3 stoppages, 10th round, 9th round. Joe Smith Jr., 6 out of his last 7 fights coming into this fight were either 9th round stoppages or later, or going the distance. 4 out of his last 7 fights had went the distance. So there were trends coming in for both fighters that both fighters went deep into fights, right? Both fighters went deep into fights. Took the under 9.5 rounds just to be sure. I would even be shocked had it made it that far. Wish I would have took that 6.5. And there was actually a boost. And I was talking to my brother about this Saturday night before the fight came on. Because usually when Caesars does this boost, odds boost, they're trying to bait you into something. And they did an odds boost. Beterbiev plus 300 if he knocked Joe Smith Jr. out in the first 6 rounds. So I'm looking at that. I'm like, ooh, That might be worth doing, but I stayed away because usually when they do the boost, they're trying to bait you into something because they know something that you do not. That wasn't the case. If you took that odds boost plus 300, Beterbiev first 6 rounds, you won big. You won big. And like I said, I was expecting a great fight that was going to turn into a great performance. I was expecting Joe Smith Jr. and Beterbiev to throw leather back and forth, a back and forth fight to first 4 or 5 rounds. And then Beterbiev was going to methodically break him down as the rounds went on in a late stoppage. And that's why I said I thought the 8.5 over under was priced correctly, because I thought that's around where it would get real dicey for Joe Smith Jr. But it got dicey for Joe Smith Jr. as soon as the bell rang. And it wasn't a great fight. It was a great performance. It was not a great fight that turned into a great performance. It was a great performance, period. Sort of anticlimactic in that, right? That we expected to see Joe Smith Jr. do more than he did, but this was all Beterbiev. This was all on Beterbiev. They know how to bait you. Always got to watch for that. That's correct. We expected Beterbiev to start slow the way he did. And for the people criticizing Joe Smith Jr. for being so face first, so front foot minded in this fight, for going straight after Beterbiev, remember the narratives coming in were Beterbiev starts slow, which is correct. 29 punches per round average the first 2 rounds until he speeds up and he averages 63 punches per round total as a fighter. So he speeds up. He gets that motor going as the fight goes on. So we all said coming in, and there's revisionist history out there, everybody was saying, pretty much everybody, Joe Smith Jr. needs to jump on Beterbiev early before Beterbiev wakes up, right? Jump on him early. See if you can land something big that's going to change the course of the fight, because we all thought as this fight goes longer, as this fight gets into the middle rounds, Joe Smith Jr. doesn't have a shot, because Beterbiev is too heavy-handed. He's going to break Joe Smith Jr. down. But what could, and why the odds were getting closer as the fight got closer, it got down to plus 450. The reason people were giving Joe Smith Jr. a chance, especially when Joe Smith Jr. by KO, those odds started to get tighter as well, is what if Joe Smith Jr. jumps on Beterbiev early and lands a punch that's going to change the course of the fight, hurt Beterbiev, and I think people are undervaluing how great of a performance this was from Beterbiev. There's a couple things here. So they're saying Joe Smith Jr. opened up too much. He was too wide, and that left Beterbiev openings. Correct. True. But here's the thing. There are certain fighters, this is one point. There are certain fighters who get better as the stage gets bigger. As the lights get bigger, they elevate their game. We saw that from Dimitri Bivol against Canelo Alvarez. I remember watching Dimitri Bivol leading up to this fight and saying, man, it doesn't seem like this guy ever puts it in 5th gear. It just seems like he stays in 3rd gear. So that could be a good thing or a bad thing, right? He has a 5th gear that we haven't seen yet, and he showed that against Canelo Alvarez. But when you don't go into that 5th gear, sometimes it's hard to find that 5th gear when you need to find it. Bivol found it. He had a level of his game. He had levels and layers of his game that we had never seen until he fought Canelo. He put on his greatest performance of his career against Canelo. He rose to the occasion. Beterbiev, the same thing. Beterbiev has looked more ordinary against more ordinary fighters than Joe Smith Jr. Beterbiev has looked worse against worse fighters than Joe Smith Jr. Joe Smith Jr., if not the best, one of the best fighters that Beterbiev has fought in the biggest stage, unification fight at 175. And Beterbiev showed us levels of his game that he had not shown us up to this point, given the quality of the opponent. Crazy Bivol went 12 with Joe, and Arthur just ran through him. That's right. That's what I'm saying. And it's the weird triangle theory of boxing, right? Just because you perform this way against this fighter doesn't mean this fighter is going to perform that way against that fighter. Great performance, but I honestly cannot believe people pick Smith to win. For me, that's very casual thinking. It was, to me, I couldn't bring myself to pick Joe Smith Jr. to win the fight. I just thought that Beterbiev was going to be too much for him, too many layers to his game, and too heavy-handed. There was a narrow margin. There was a narrow pathway to victory for Joe Smith Jr., but I expected him to have those moments early that he did not have. So given our expectations, this was a great performance by Beterbiev in this fight. He showed the tightness of his punches, right? Joe Smith Jr. was wide, and in between those punches, Beterbiev saw those openings and took advantage of them. And it's not only that the openings were there that Beterbiev opened up. I believe Beterbiev, as I was just saying about Bivol, is one of those guys who rises to the level of his opposition. As the stage gets bigger, he gets better. And I just believe that Beterbiev came with the mindset that I'm ending this thing early. I don't care what he brings. I don't care if he opens up. I don't care if he doesn't open up. I'm going in there in attack mode, and I'm opening up against this guy. Forget the 29 point something punches per round I throw in the first 2 rounds of fights that I average. I'm opening up against this guy. And that's what he did. And he put to bed a lot of the narratives coming in. 37 years old, so he may be up there in age and slowing down. He's a slow starter. He put that stuff to bed. He put it to bed. Good night to those narratives. What he showed us is that he can elevate to the stage, whatever level it takes, and he can fight any different style that he needs to fight for that fight. If I need to open up early, I'll open up early. If I need to rely on the jab more, I can do that. He showed the levels in order to open Joe Smith Jr. up early. He threw the jab upstairs. You saw that he has an underrated jab. He threw the jab to the body. He hurt Joe Smith Jr. to the body. Go back and watch that first round. He hurt Joe Smith Jr. to the body bad. He threw hooks around the high guard. He opened up the high guard by throwing uppercuts up the middle. So he opened up the high guard by throwing shots around the high guard. So Joe Smith Jr. brings him out a little bit. Then he starts to throw the uppercuts, and the uppercuts are beautiful. Beautiful. He can throw uppercuts to the body. He can throw them back upstairs. He can disguise it as a body shot that goes upstairs. Levels to his game. He showed the lateral movement in this fight. Joe Smith Jr. would try to counter him. Beterbiev is already gone. He's gone. He's gone. He threw feints in this fight. The right hand that he landed to end the fight, or I don't know if it was to end the fight or the one that was the first. Yeah, it was the first knockdown towards the end of the first round. Joe Smith Jr. was expecting a left hand, and a right hook came in instead and landed. Joe Smith Jr. had not been floored in his multi-year professional career until this fight. Beterbiev did it with ease. With ease. See what we got. Joe has a history of stepping up in big fights too. He does. He does. And that's what makes this crazy is he has a history of upsetting fighters. He has a history of being one of those dangerous underdogs. So that was another narrative coming in is Joe Smith Jr. will rise to the occasion. Beterbiev, we don't really know because he's put on, even though he has a 100% KO percentage, he's put on lackluster performances before to where we're like, man, Beterbiev is better than that. I expected better than that. I expected more. He's carried fighters into late rounds in fights before. And to Joe Smith Jr.'s credit, he tried to execute a game plan that was his only opportunity to win the fight. And his only opportunity to win the fight was to open up against this guy early and try to land a big shot that was going to change the trajectory of the fight, because as the fight goes on, Beterbiev gets stronger, and Joe Smith Jr.'s percentage of winning the fight will go down with each round. So he tried to open up against Beterbiev early, And in doing that, Beterbiev had more opportunities to end the fight early. Whereas a lot of Beterbiev's opponents in the past have not opened up early, even though that's their best opportunity to open up in the fight. And Beterbiev patiently waits those guys out and then steps up the output as the fight goes on. Joe Smith Jr. went for his opportunity early, and he fell face first because he simply went in there with a special fighter. And more on that in a minute. Let me get to these comments. Shout out D Nice in the building. Arthur can box and move a little too. He used good lateral movement. I think he can box with Bivol and most likely wreck him later in the fight. Bivol is a big, solid 175-pounder, though. And Bivol actually fights close to his weight. He walks around low 180s and fights close to his weight. He said he can make 168 easily. So I don't know if Bivol is going to have a size advantage against Beterbiev, but that's an interesting fight that I'll talk about in a minute. Yarde better be careful what he wishes for. And yes, I'm about to get to that. Yarde better stay away. He thought Kovalev was tough. He ain't seen nothing. Prime Kovalev versus Beterbiev would have been a classic, and I would have taken Beterbiev because I think Beterbiev is stronger mentally. I think he's a more solid dude, physically and mentally. And I'm not undervaluing what Kovalev was in his prime because we all saw what we saw up until the second Andre Ward fight. Kovalev was a beast. However, I think Beterbiev would have broke him down to the body. I think he would have done what Andre Ward did in the second fight, except it would have been nastier. But these conversations start to get interesting when we start to talk about mythical matchups at light heavyweight and matchups that could possibly happen between active fighters down the line. So for all you people who pretend to like defensive style, who would you rather watch? Beterbiev, Inoue, or Floyd Haney? And that's another thing Beterbiev showed in this fight. The stoppage, the punches that he landed to stop the fight, he was going off his back foot. He landed 2 punches going off his back foot with 2 different hands. So he's a better defensive fighter than people give him credit for as well. He can fight off the back foot, not only the front foot. People try to make him out to be this sort of caveman style fighter. He's not. He showed that Saturday night. He can fight off the front foot. He can fight off the back foot. He can show you lateral movement. He's one of those guys that I think he gets disinterested in defense once his power starts to show. So maybe people read into that he's not a great defensive fighter. Let me get to the poll here. Who is the number 1 light heavyweight, Beterbiev or Bivol? 71% say Beterbiev. 29% say Bivol. And that's interesting. That's interesting of those poll results because I said coming into the fight, I tweeted this out Friday, no matter what Beterbiev or Joe Smith Jr. do, they can't overtake Bivol for number 1 at light heavyweight. Bivol, for a lot of people, was seen as the number 1 light heavyweight. He was a big underdog coming in against Canelo. I thought he won 9 rounds against Canelo. Being that he beat the pound-for-pound king, I don't think there's anything you can do to overtake him at number 1 until you beat him. And then I watched Beterbiev fight against Joe Smith Jr., who is the clear number 3 guy. Some people would have Zerto number 3. My updated rankings this morning on CalixBoxing.com, I now have Zerto number 3, Joe Smith Jr. number 4. But Joe Smith Jr. was seen as the number 3 guy coming in, and Beterbiev just put him to sleep early. So it becomes interesting. Like, I can understand the argument that people would have for Beterbiev number 1 now, because you would say he beat a top 3 guy at the weight, and Canelo was not a top guy at the weight because Canelo's a super middleweight, even though Bivol is the guy. An interesting thing about this is watching this fight, I said to myself, a couple months ago, we would have said, and Vegas said, Canelo's a clear favorite against Bivol. I mean, he was a clear, healthy favorite against Bivol by Vegas odds. We saw in the mythical odds, if the fight were to happen, Canelo was a clear favorite against Beterbiev. Look at where we're at now. Watching Bivol beat Canelo and then watching Beterbiev do to Joe Smith Jr. what he did, I say to myself, man, Canelo needs to stay away from 175. He needs to stay away from these Russians at 175. And props to him for taking on that challenge. I'm not trying to dissuade anybody from taking on challenges. I'm not trying to dissuade Yardy for trying to be great and wanting to fight Beterbiev in October. I'm a boxing fan, so I like seeing people dare to be great. But Canelo needs to stay away from the Russians at 175, man. I don't see him doing anything different against Bivol in the second fight. I don't see him. I mean, if he trades with Beterbiev, if there's a guy who's going to knock Canelo out, it would be Beterbiev. And I think there's no shame in staying at 168. Planting your toes at 168 and saying, I'm the guy here. I've collected all the belts. Bring on all challengers. Bring me David Benavidez. 160 Charlo wants to move up to 168, become 168 Charlo. Give me that fight. There's no shame in carrying out the original plan this year, saying I'm going to fight Golovkin in September. I'm going to fight Ryder over in the UK in December or February. And then when next May rolls around, let's take the PBC deal, the much easier deal, because Canelo took the tougher deal when he took the DAZN deal. And props to him for that, but it is the tougher deal. And when you start to talk about Beterbiev and Bivol at 175, it's going to be tough to beat one of those guys. I just don't see it happening right now. I think those are the two best fighters at 175, clearly, and two top 10 pound-for-pound guys. And I'll get to my pound-for-pound list here in a minute because both guys are in the top 8 in my pound-for-pound now. Yeah, top 8 pound-for-pound right now in my top 12 pound-for-pound list. But Beterbiev just looks scary, man. And after watching this fight, after watching Bivol fight Canelo, I said, I don't see anybody at 175 beating Bivol. And then I watched Beterbiev fight Joe Smith Jr. I'm like, I don't see anybody beating that guy at 175. And it reminds me of these matchups we got when the narrative we got when Pacquiao and Mayweather were in their run at welterweight. When Mayweather would fight, I'd say, man, I don't see Pacquiao beating him. And then when Pacquiao would fight, and you'd see that shift, people would say, man, I think Pacquiao would beat Mayweather. It was back and forth, recency bias. And the same thing here. And you know you have a good matchup when that's the case. It's the same thing with Crawford versus Spence. The best matchups in boxing that can be made. You got one this weekend, Bam Rodriguez versus Sor Rungvisai. How do you see that fight playing out? It can play out many different ways, but it's close to a toss-up fight. I watched Sor Rungvisai fight on YouTube, and I'm like, Bam Rodriguez might have a tough night. I watched Bam Rodriguez do what he did to Carlos Cuadras, and I say, I think he can beat Sor Rungvisai. That's what great matchups do. And it's the same thing with Beterbiev versus Bivol. I don't know how that fight plays out. I don't. And I have no shame in that transparency saying that. Can Bivol's defensive style give Beterbiev trouble throughout the fight? Bivol's output doesn't go down as the fight goes on. Beterbiev gets better as the fight goes on. Bivol, an economical fighter, but he holds his opponents to lower punch output. His punch output, his opponents land 12% of power punches against him. So you say that and you say, if there is a guy who's going to beat Beterbiev, it would be him. Beterbiev is not going to land the power punches against Bivol that he landed against Joe Smith Jr. But at the same time, you say Bivol has never faced anything like he's going to face against Beterbiev. And that's why I want to see the fight right now. Right now. Why are they cock blocking this fight? And there are theories out there. Bivol can't do anything until the Canelo rematch. Mandatories. But look, Beterbiev has a certain amount of time before he honors that mandatory. Right? So I just want to see him go straight to Beterbiev versus Bivol. undisputed. I think there should be gentlemen agreements in boxing. Once we're one fight away from undisputed in a weight class, get straight to it. Get straight to it. Enough with the mandatories. Everything else should go to the side. Grant these guys waivers, exceptions, get straight to the undisputed. Waive the rematch clauses, waive all that stuff, get straight to undisputed. So now they're talking about Beterbiev versus Yard. Yard, some people call him Yardy, but whatever they call him, he better stay away from Beterbiev. If he's fighting this guy in October, and I said the same thing about Inoue against Butler, it's going to look like Vector, and Stranger Things 4 ripping these high school kids to pieces limb by limb. That's what this fight's going to look like. It's going to be a fatality. Look, this is a perfect fight for Beterbiev because it keeps him active. And he hasn't, that's one knock on him, right? 17 fights in 9 years. He hasn't been an active fighter. He hasn't been as active as he should be. One fight per year fighter. I think he fought twice in 2021, though, if I'm not mistaken. And it would be good to have him fight twice in 2022. So in that right, keeping him active, keeping him in front of people's faces, highlight real KOs, that's all good. In fighting Yardy, he's still fighting a top 10 guy over in the UK where it makes sense and it's a big fight. And now you can highlight Beterbiev to the American fans with this fight against Joe Smith Jr. You can do it with the UK fans. You take them sort of on this barnstorming tour. So all that's good. And he will destroy Yardy. And you keep him active. All that's good. All that's good. What's not good, though, is we want to see Beterbiev versus Bivol now. But what's going to happen, what we want and what's going to happen are two different things. What's going to happen is he fights the mandatory against Yard in October, and he destroys him because he will destroy him, and he will destroy him early. And then hopefully we get Bivol versus Zurdo Ramirez because that would be beautiful. That would be beautiful. The monkey wrench in all of this, the wild card is, will the Bivol versus Canelo rematch happen? I believe it will in May. So that's what I'm saying. Like, it's frustrating to watch this play out because I can see it playing out clearly in my head how it's going to play out. It's going to play out with Beterbiev fighting Yard in October, and then Bivol fighting someone later this year. I don't know who it is. Hopefully Zurdo. And then the Canelo rematch is going to get in the way of Beterbiev versus Bivol at that point. So we're looking likely at 3 fights away from undisputed at 175 because these two Russians at 175 are on a collision course. They're on a collision course and nobody's stopping that. Nobody's stopping it. So I want to see the collision course happen now. I don't want it being 3 fights away. It's now one of the best fights that can be made in boxing. It's up there with Crawford versus Spence. Bob Arum's out there throwing cold water on it, saying that the zone is dead zone and we're not going to fight Bivol because nobody knows Bivol. And that's crap because more people saw Canelo versus Bivol than saw Beterbiev versus Joe Smith Jr. I can guarantee you that. You can call it dead zone all you want. I like the zone. And DAZN has some of the biggest fighters in the sport. And DAZN gives me good fights every weekend. This is more politics. Do a cross promotion. ESPN Top Rank, DAZN, get it done. I don't care how you get it done. Get it done. The fans want to see it. It's undisputed. And it's 2 of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the sport. Get it done. Get it done. Low blow champion of billing. Prime Kovalev versus Beterbiev would have been a classic. Yeah, I believe I read that one, and it would have. It would have. So all you people, I read that one. Prime Ward versus Prime Beterbiev. Oh. That would have been a tough fight for Ward. And that may be recency bias as well. That would have been a good fight. Inoue versus Beterbiev used defense as offense. So did Marquez. So did Virgil. And there's no break in between both of them. They mesh perfectly, right? It's all fluid. And Beterbiev is one of those fighters. One of those fighters. His defense flows into his offense. His offense flows into his defense. He can fight off the front foot. He can fight off the back foot. He can use the lateral movement. He can disguise punches. He can disguise his hooks as jabs. He was lighting Joe Smith Jr. up with the jab to the body and upstairs. And then the left hook that he landed early in the fight in the first round was disguised as a jab. It went around the high guard. Then he landed a right hook around the high guard. And then he started landing the uppercuts as the high guard started to widen. And you can do that stuff when you have heavy hands because your opponent's going to react to everything that you do. Everything once they feel that power. And when Beterbiev opened up early, you knew the fight was over. You knew the fight was over. And nobody expected Beterbiev to open up the way he did early in this fight. And that's why I say he rises to the occasion. As the lights get bigger, he gets better. Bivol beat a 168-pounder. And that's the argument for Beterbiev being number one. I have Bivol number one in my rankings right now. Beterbiev number two, Zerto number three, Joe Smith Jr. number four. But if you have Beterbiev number one over Bivol, I'm not going to argue you down. That's good critical thinking. It's solid. I can't really argue it. I think you can go either way. As much as I like Bivol and his skills, Beterbiev has been snatching belts from reigning champs. Bivol did Canelo a favor, knocking out 175. Had Canelo won, he might have gassed into fighting Arthur. And I think that would have been a beautiful fight. It would have been fun. But I think it would have gotten ugly for Canelo in hindsight. Kovalev was throwing right-handed jabs versus Canelo. I still think he threw the fight. I see people throwing out that narrative, but I think Canelo broke Kovalev down as the fight went on because Kovalev, and that's what I'm saying, like this mythical matchup, Beterbiev versus Kovalev, I think Beterbiev would have destroyed Kovalev as the fight went on because Kovalev is not up here what Beterbiev is. He's not. He's just not. Beterbiev would have destroyed Kovalev mentally as the fight went on. He would have went to that body. And Kovalev would have given in. What do you think of Bob Arum making excuses and putting up roadblocks, that undisputed matchup? That's what I was talking about. Like, it's politics. And it's Bob Arum wanting to keep the money in-house. Obviously. It's him wanting to keep it on ESPN. And we need to just get to undisputed. Because Bivol versus Beterbiev is now, they just, and this is a good comment, they've been on a collision course for 3-4 years now. Boxing knows how to do this thing, how to drag a movie along. Like a great book, you got the chapters building up until that last chapter, but a great book, the last chapter happens when it needs to happen. And this is not happening when it needs to happen. And Bob Arum needs to be careful here, though, because Beterbiev, although he did not look old, he did not look his age, he's 37. He's 37. Keep that in mind. Bivol's younger. So as I see this playing out, I just think it's now 2 to 3 fights off. If you look at the landscape right now, they're talking about Beterbiev versus Yard next in London. And then Bivol is going to have to honor a Canelo rematch, which is likely happening in May 2023. If you listen to Eddie Hearn and Canelo. So now we're talking about this fight possibly happening the end of 2023 at best. Come on, man. Get to it. Get to it. They've been on a collision course too long. Beterbiev is damn near 40. He should get that Bivol fight ASAP. Yep. I agree. What's your prediction for Fulton versus Inoue? Don't know. It's another one of those that can go either way. It's another one of those that can go either way. That's a lot of weight to chew for Inoue. It's a lot of weight. We're talking about a 5th weight class for him at that point. You can tell how special a fighter is, too, by how people talk about him when they do stuff like that. Like, people act like it's just a normal thing. Inoue's fighting in the 5th weight class. He's already in his 4th weight class. It's not normal. It's not normal. And they do it more for lightweight class fighters because they look at it and they say, oh, there's not much difference between 108, 112, 112, 115. It's a couple pounds, but the percentage is much different when you're talking about that low in weight. Moving up from junior welterweight to welterweight is the same as moving up from 112 to 115 if you look at it percentage-wise. And there's sharks in those divisions, so it's special what Inoue is doing. Salute Evil Green in the building. Beterbiev is a killer inside the ring. He's a really nice guy. He's actually a lawyer, isn't he? I'm not sure what he is, but I know he's a great fighter, and I know that he's an even-tempered guy. And that's when people think of heavy-handed knockout pressure fighters, they just think of caveman. They think of a guy who's not that smart. You're talking about a guy with a high IQ. He's mentally there. He's even-tempered. He can show you many different levels to his game if his opponent brings that out of him. So I just think that I want to continue to see Beterbiev challenged against the top fighters in the weight class, because I want to see somebody bring something out of him that I haven't seen yet, because I still feel like there are other things I haven't seen, which is crazy. And I think Bivol would be the guy to do that. And the same thing opposite. Like, I think there are levels to Bivol's game that we have not seen yet, as crazy as that sounds. And Beterbiev would bring that out of him. It's one of the best pure matchups that can happen in the sport right now. Canelo needs to fall back and let Bivol and Beterbiev make history. That's what I'm saying. Like, I just want to see Canelo drop the rematch and say, you know what, I'm staying at 168, bring on all comers. And there's no shame in that. There's no shame in that. We said last year, if Canelo loses a fight, it's going to be that he bit off more than he can chew as far as stepping up a weight class. And as he moved through 168, we said maybe 175 is not going to be the weight class where that happens. Maybe it's cruiserweight. He started flirting with that, but that was wrong. 175 is it. That's his ceiling. And I think Canelo needs to stay put at 168 and let these Russians handle each other. Beterbiev give you a Khabib. Yes, he does. He does. He gives you that Khabib aura about him. Like, it doesn't really matter what you bring to the table. I'm even-tempered. Bring on whatever you want to bring on. I'm going to fight a certain amount of fights, and I'm going to retire undefeated. That's what Beterbiev, that's his vibes that he's putting out there to me. Bivol is a way better boxer than Crusher. He has patience. I agree. That's just Bob politic talk. Beterbiev and Bivol are better than Kovalev was in his prime. If somebody wants to disagree with that, they can, and maybe you can come up with a good argument for it, but I would argue otherwise. They're both better than Crusher was in his prime because mentally they just seem there. They have something that Kovalev did not have, and that's that mental toughness. It's an even temper, because Kovalev showed that you could get to him in pre-fight talk. Andre Ward was all in his head, rent-free. He was all in his head. You could get to Kovalev leading up to a fight. You could get to Kovalev in the fight by going to the body. That was his Achilles heel. There's a reason why one of history's best, Finito Lopez, took a long time to go from 105 to 108. Those 3 pounds are a lot for them little guys. That's what I'm saying. Percentage-wise, it's the same. And that's right. Khabib and Beterbiev put on similar vibes. But so if you look at my top 12 pound for pound, I put it in the comment section below, but I'll go over it here. My updated rankings, I have Beterbiev jumping into my top 12 pound for pound at number 8. And I have Lomachenko falling out of my top 12. And if you look at this top 12, they're full of guys that have put on great performances as of recent, on top of having a lot of they've just had a lot of collateral built up throughout their career up to this point. So they passed the eye test as well, but they've all put on great performances as of recent. So guys who aren't fighting top competition right now are getting left behind. So I think that's why you get guys right now, when you're in a run that we're in boxing right now, one of the best runs we've had in modern history from April to now, you have guys putting on great performances, and then other guys start to get FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. They don't want to miss that wave. They see these other guys putting on great performances and then stepping into the pound for pound list, getting these accolades, and they want to become a part of it too. It's healthy for the sport. And you start to see that recycling process, right? The younger fighters coming in and the older fighters starting to fall out, but then you have older fighters hanging on as well. Terrence Crawford, Errol Spence Jr., Artur Beterbiev, who's 37 years old. The special ones hang on. Chocolatito, they hang on. So you start to have that interesting process in the pound for pound where it's fluid, it's volatile, but the special fighters hang on as the younger fighters start to move in. Number 1 on my pound for pound list, Alexander Usyk. Number 2, Alexander Usyk, although not recent, beat Anthony Joshua in a great performance. Inoue just beat Donaire in a great performance. Terrence Crawford beat Sean Porter in a great performance. So although not as recent, coming off of great performances, Canelo Alvarez, although coming off of a loss, number 4 on my list because he built up so much equity by his run at 168, and I don't have him falling that far. I have him still at number 4. Jermell Charlo becoming undisputed. I have him number 5. He became undisputed at 154, and he did it in a tough run, beating all the top competition in his weight class. And oh, by the way, it looks like he wants to stay at 154 and fight Tim Tszyu. Number 6, Errol Spence Jr. coming off of a great performance against Yordenis Ugas. Number 7, this is when I get to the 2 Russians. Dmitry Bivol jumping in, catapulting into the pound-for-pound rankings at number 7 off of the great performance against Canelo, which I had him winning 117, 111 in the fight. If you have Bivol higher than that, then that's fine. I have him jumping in at number 7, and I hope he capitalizes. I hope he's given the opportunity to capitalize off of that win. Beterbiev jumps into the top 12 pound for pound for me at number 8. The only thing that was keeping him out of the pound for pound list for me is only 17 fights in 9 years, number 1. Number 2, like I said, it was hard to judge Beterbiev coming in, and revisionist history right now will tell you otherwise, but it looked like he was in 3rd and 4th gear in these fights. He was carrying guys into later rounds in fights. So you say, how would he look against a Joe Smith Jr.? How would he look against Canelo Alvarez if he got that fight? How would he look against Dmitry Bivol at 175? Now we get a clearer look at that, fighting a top 3 guy at 175 and destroying him in the first 2 rounds, putting narratives to sleep that he's a slow starter and he's an aging fighter. And oh, by the way, showing layers to his game. So I got him jumping into number 8. And by the way, Bivol and Beterbiev, if they fight each other, they got chances to fight to climb into the top 5 pound for pound, or if they stay active and continue knocking guys out. They're right on the outside now. Shakur Stevenson, number 9, another guy. All these guys have one thing in common. Great, coming off of great performances. Shakur Stevenson beating Oscar Valdez and winning every round and doing it, in my opinion. Another great performance. Number 10, Chocolatito. I have Chocolatito on my list still because I had him beating Gallo Estrada, and then he's coming off another great performance. And by the way, it looks like he's going to be fighting Gallo Estrada in a trilogy. So I still have Chocolatito on there. If you have Gallo Estrada on instead of him, that's fine. But once again, guys, great performances. And then you have veteran fighters hanging on in the top 10, top 12 pound for pound list. Devin Haney coming off of a great performance against Kambosos, winning undisputed. I got him number 11. He's on my pound for pound list. And Stephen Fulton, another guy coming off of a great performance. All these guys have that in common. Great performances against other top fighters in their weight class. So what this is going to lead to, this is a copycat sport, as every sport is a copycat sport. It's going to lead to other great matchups in the sport. Other guys are going to see this and say, you know what? I see the accolades that they're getting in the boxing world. I see how people are praising them for beating a top opponent in their weight class and doing it in great fashion. I want to join this wave. I want to jump on here. And then you'll have guys like, say, Jermall Charlo at 160 get left behind, right? Because he's not doing that. You'll see a guy like Tank Davis get left behind because he's not doing that. These guys are not going to sniff the pound for pound list when you have what you have going on in the sport of boxing right now, where guys are daring to be great and they're putting on great performances. So what's more impressive to you? Inoue winning in 4 divisions, or Usyk dominating cruiser and jumping to heavyweight and becoming unified heavyweight champ? That's tough. It's tough. But you would say cruiserweight In heavyweight, not as talented divisions as those lower weight classes, but at the same time, giving up that much weight and jumping into a weight where there is no weight limit at heavyweight and beating a guy like Anthony Joshua and going on the run that Usyk has gone on at heavyweight. And on top of that, in the two weight classes he's performed in, cruiserweight and heavyweight, he's consolidated 7 of the 8 major belts, Usyk, on top of all that. And he's done it in less than 20 fights. Phenomenal. So I don't really know. Take your pick. And that's what I'm saying. Like, as far as pound for pound, if you have people tell me, oh, and you shouldn't have Inoue number 1, you should have Usyk. Either way. Ness was complaining about why Inoue is considered the monster and not Beterbiev, insinuating deriding. He forgot it's harder to search boxers at lower weight. Starch, yeah, I agree with your stats. And yeah, it's all good points, but Beterbiev's a monster too. What a performance. Jab the like, please. Shout out to my guy, Nando. Appreciate the support, Nando. I appreciate that. And we're just on a great run in boxing. You have guys putting on great performances. The pound for pound list is more volatile from top to bottom than it's been in recent history. And that's indicative of a climate in which guys, it's a very competitive climate right now, where you have guys from minimum weight up to heavyweight trying to get on these mythical lists, fighting top competition, and they're putting on great performances. It's just a great run. And then to add to that, look at what you got coming up this weekend. That card this weekend in San Antonio is stacked from top to bottom. Stacked. I mean, you got multiple meaningful fights that on paper are entertaining. Sorong Vise versus Bam Rodriguez. And you got MJ Akhmadaliev against Ronnie Rios on that card as well, amongst other fights that are meaningful, top 10 fights in these divisions that look like they're going to be entertaining. But what a performance we had this weekend against Beterbiev. I still think Big Figueroa beats Fulton. Beat Fulton, yeah. And D-Style believes that as well. He's like, y'all are building Fulton up too much because I felt Figueroa beat him. And once again, that was a close fight. I need to start following his lower weight class more. Thanks for talking about them, Calix. There's not many channels. I know. And it's because of the clicks. Don't get it twisted. Like, the lower weight classes do not bring the clicks. They do not bring the subs. You know what brings the subs right now? Talking about business when it comes to Crawford versus Spence. That's one. Inter-channel beefs. Those bring the clicks, but it is what it is. I'm going to talk about what I find entertaining, and that's the lower weight classes for me. I'm heavy and becoming heavier lower weight class on this channel. And it's just fun. Once you start to get under 130, man, especially 118 and lower, it gets real fun. You really follow those lower weight classes. Most American fight fans have no idea who fights below 140 is correct. Bam, it's a regional thing, right? If you look at, and that's why I put the champions by country on my website. Between 135 and 160, it's hard to find champions, like real champions who aren't American. And then when you get above 160, it's hard to find them that aren't Eastern European. And then once you get below 130, it's hard to find them not Latin American or Asian, especially when you get under 118. When you got, I believe under 118, you got 8 championships that are held by Japanese fighters. Bam is insane taking on Ronvise this soon in his career in at 150. That's what I'm saying. It's guys there to be great. And I just named my top 12 pound for pound, and Bam's not in there. Guess what? It's going to get more volatile. It's going to get tougher to stay on the pound for pound list, because if Bam Rodriguez beats Sorong Vise this weekend, he's on it. He's on it. So who do you kick out at that point? For me, it'll be Stephen Fulton. But it's not only tough to get on it, it's even tougher to stay on it. And that is a healthy competitive climate in boxing doing that. It's great for for boxing fans. Can Beterbiev Bivol happen without any real financial impetus? Spence Bud still a struggle to sign years later. That's what I'm saying. I think Bob is saying And I think it's deeper than that. I think Bob wants to continue on this train where Beterbiev just steamrolls guys and makes a good bit of money. There's a lot of money to be made in UK, and they're going to take it there with Yard. But economically, can they fit the money in there? Possibly. I think it'll be easier than Spence Crawford to do that. But I also think this theory that both of them being Russian isn't helping as well. I think that's why Bob is keeping this fight off for right now. But we'll see. We'll see. Hopefully they make it happen. Zurdo Bivol makes dollars and cents this year, and that's what I'm saying. That's what I said earlier. If Beterbiev does go in this direction of Faryardi, it seems like it's a done deal in October. Hopefully Bivol is free to go fight Zurdo, because there are rumors that Bivol can't do anything until the Canelo rematch. I hope that's not true. I hope Bivol is free to go make another fight. And if so, I'd love to see the Zurdo fight. On that note, man, I appreciate y'all. I got to get to some business. God bless. Talk to y'all soon.